Hello, welcome. Enjoy the video.
We talked about social media use and how that has crept us on us, and we are really having to deal with it. It's real, it's not going to go away. We have our children on social media, on different internet platforms, and it's like trying to manage this and not let it become an addiction for them, but also guide them along the way. And we shared a lot of resources with our parents, but we're going to delve into other areas that I think we didn't get into. And let's start from that area of addiction and mental health as well. And Dr. Joy, I'll start with you. Cesar, how do you address, living in a state? Because in the US now, we have some states that have legalized marijuana or some of these, drugs, and it's legal in those states, like Colorado, a few other places are considering that. How do you address a child in that environment? We know we have to talk to them, but when you are in a state that is legalized, how do you equip your child to work through the system when it's so accessible to them at a certain age and you cannot really influence that? So that's our first question.
Okay. Thank you so much, LP. And I want to start with the principle, one principle that I learned from Bishop Dark, actually. He said something. He said that our environment trains our children even more than we know or more than we think. Yeah. So although we are doing the primary training, the environment is also training them.
Right.
And so it's a real challenge. And now that things are becoming legalized, like marijuana, there's a temptation for children to think that because it's legal, then it's permitted. And because it's legal, I'm allowed to do it.
Right.
But something like driving is legal, but then children don't drive for a reason.
For a reason.
Until a certain age. Children lack the insight and the judgment for some particular activities. So children need to understand that there are age-appropriate activities that they can engage in. And so these are all just general principles. I mean, beyond marijuana, we have tobacco, alcohol, cocaine, all these other things. I mean, the most dangerous legal drug is alcohol. That's the most dangerous legal drug. Yeah. Anyway, but I think talking about approaches generally, the training or the intervention must have started a long time ago.
Long time ago.
Not now. I mean, you don't wait until the problem pops up before you start. And so our show of love, I mean, unconditional love, for them to be convinced that we are for them. We are seeking their welfare and their good, and we always stand by them. That is critical. And if it ever happens that they come up and we've discovered that they are involved in these things, I think the important thing is to stay calm. That's very, very, very important, because sometimes we freak out when we realize that these things that we never imagined are popping up. Stay calm, pray for wisdom, gather some information, do some research because these children of today, you can't just tell them that, do it because I said so. That won't fly.
Yeah.
We have to gather some data, some education on the effects of marijuana on the brain and all of that. So when we sit down to initiate the conversation, we are coming from an informed perspective. And we are bringing data and facts that are convincing. And of course, we need to pledge our support, that I'll stand with you through the process. When it's time for you to make that decision, then you would be prepared to make that decision. And I think some of it also must include some environmental, like I said, environment trains them a lot. So environmental modification, maybe I should use that term, environmental modification, where we reduce time that they are spending with outsiders a lot. You know, they spend a lot of time with outsiders, time that they're spending on their own, even in their rooms, because sometimes in teenage years they tend to spend a lot of time
on their own in their room.
And we only God knows what's happening behind those closed doors.
Right.
And I've had parents come to me at my practice, very, very, I mean, they're freaking out about what they discovered. And they didn't know it was going on all along.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, all those things are important. The environmental modification, the openness in talking, the love, and then the hard facts. I think will come in very, very handy.
Yeah. Amazing. So you touched on a lot of things. The environment is training them. We have to keep an eye on who they have in the environment. How do we make sure that is not influencing them even in the way that they are thinking or acting out? But then you also talked about the fact that, you know, when they come to you, we have to be calm. So of course, I'm going to go to you on that question. Calm. I mean, you have raised all your kids, they are older. And I mean, but you still had your challenges at the time they were growing. How do you talk to someone? Because that was the next question. That if I catch if I caught my son or daughter who is involved in this, doing drugs and all that, what do I do? How do I manage that? This is coming from a culture that doesn't tolerate some of these things. And the normal reaction is freak out and go all out and go, you know, be stuck with it. But here we are, different environment, stay calm. How do we do that? Also, how did you do that? And how do we do that?
All right, thank you very much. I want to add a little bit to what Dr. Joy just said about the factors that affect our children, especially in this community, in this nation, or in this part of the world, where marijuana is legalized by various states, not federally, but by some of the states. Just yesterday, I read that President Biden has had to let go about 5 of his staff, 5 of his White House workers, because of marijuana use and hard drug use. Of course, the details of the report is that not all of them, they realize that for some of them minor, but others is very hard drugs, so they have to let them go. But they are trying to find a way to make the system a bit lenient to those who've had just minor use of the. But the point is, it's legalized in these states, and we live in some of these states, and they affect our children. What do we do? I want to stretch it beyond just that to look at 6 factors that influence our children.
Okay.
Whether we are aware of them or not, they are every day influencing, affecting, speaking, giving instructions, commands, and directions, and giving ideas and perspective to our children. 6 of them. Okay. And I've noted them here. I wrote a book on smart parenting. And I'm just reading one of something I wrote out there. 6 factors, powerful factors, that consciously or unconsciously, whether we are aware or not, they affect us. Number 1, the home and the family. The home. Whatever goes on in the home, whether verbalized, vocalized, or silent, is affecting our children. When parents are quarreling and the children are quiet, it's affecting them. Wow. They may not say anything, but they are imbibing something. And one of the things they imbibe is that they try the issues going on in the home in their own minds. And they arrive at judgments which they don't tell you. They know who is at fault, who is right, who is wrong. They know what is the cause, what could be the cause in their minds, and then they come to conclusions, and it forms part of the thing that shaped them when they grow up. Wow. So the home and the family are influencing our children. Number 2, the school system. Number 3, religious systems. Number 4, society. We talk about Hollywood and even in American politics, what has gone on in the country and all. Children form their opinions.
Yes, yes.
I'll give you an example where I'm not being political, but I just making a point. So whether you are on the left or the right, don't judge what I'm saying based on left or right. I'm just making a point. When the last election was held and the results came out favoring this news site, a mother watched the news, the breaking news about who had won. Obviously, an African-American mother. And so she was so surprised. So she called her son, who appeared to be maybe 6-7 years, to quickly come and listen to the news. So the boy came to listen to the news, listened, was standing there quietly, and the boy burst out crying. About the change of the system. What I mean that children were imbibing emotional pain with what is going on. So society has influence. And number 5, peers. The peers of our children are influencing them, and we all can tell. We all have our fair share of peer pressure, peer influence. And number 6, the latest guy in town, the latest influencer in town, social media. So all these powerful factors are influencing our children, whether we know about them or not, whether we like them or not. So we better take care of the whole of the steer and direct our children the way we want them to go, because each one of these 6 factors are seeking to drive them to the way that they want. So your question is, how do we react as parents when our children come or we see our children going offline? You said the first thing is calm. Obviously, naturally, you will react maybe angrily, emotionally. Fine, that's fine. But eventually, stabilize yourself. One, because the end of the world hasn't come yet. That doesn't mean that is the end of the child. And then also stabilize yourself, because you still have a chance to take hold of the steer and direct it gradually. And then use what I call teaching moments. Many a time we Christian parents, we try to force the Bible down the throat of our children. It used to work some time ago, but in this generation where Dr. Joyce said it's a generation of, he used an expression like, they ask why. It's a why generation. And if we raise our children with commandments without understanding, it will always backfire. If we command them, do it, they may do because you are the parent, you are the authority, you are in charge, you pay the fees, you do it. They will, but in their minds, they haven't accepted it. But if they ask why, you know, in African context, children are not permitted to ask why. That's why many of us grow up with deficit in confidence and whatever, self-worth. But in these communities, in this part of the world where children have been brought up to ask why, not that they want to disobey, but they want to understand. And when they understand, their change is more permanent than when they have to obey without understanding. So use teachable moments. Don't use the Bible as John chapter 1 verse Moses said, the Bible Jesus even said, and then broadcast, and it's not going to work. So rather use teachable moments. And I'm going to read from the Bible one of the methods Jesus, God said we should use when this happen. But before they happen, we the parents must ask ourselves, what have been the values we have lived out in the home?
lived out.
Let me just go off a little bit. If you are a Christian parent and you take your children to church in your car, and you are coming back from church, and excuse my language, you are insulting the pastor, or you are attacking the church, and you are speaking evil of other members of the church, other Christians or other people in the car, and you say all pastors are bad, all pastors are this, your children are hearing. How can they grow up trusting the values of the church?
Yeah.
So we tend to undo what we are trying to do. Right. We undermine our own systems. So we must ask ourselves, what must have caused this in my child? What have been the values I've been living out in this home?
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that if you live out an angelic values, your children may also follow. No, sometimes they go off. But there are two things parents must, I'll probably come to that. Two things parents must pay attention to. Our job, we cannot permanently change our children, but our job is to, one, teach them the values required for life.
Right.
Teach them the values. And two, endeavor to live out the values. The rest, only God will determine it.
Wow. That is a powerful, a lot of, information that you shared right there with us, because that's the thing, us living the values that we are saying, and the values, the kids are watching. Like you said, the 6 factors are real. It's influencing us one way or the other, and we may not even be aware of it. And that is, that is really important as we look at our children today. Let me just tag on with a question that is also in line with all these. So now that we are talking about our living the values ourselves, one of the questions we had was around anger management, and we'll add anxiety to it, right? How do we manage that in our children? I know that a lot of our homes, we have a lot of anger in there. And we have a lot of anger. We get angry about a lot of things. I don't know, but it's just part of our growing up, and it used to be seen as normal until we get into a different environment and we realize that maybe the yelling and the screaming and the anger is not normal, and it's not the best way of controlling people or helping people. So now the question is, how do I manage my child's anger or anxiety? And maybe it's back to the fact that, are we ourselves angry at home? Is that where they are learning it from, Dr. Joy? And then Apostle Frank can also add to it.
Yeah, okay, so since there's a follow-on, let me just round up with the previous question and then add my response to this one. We're talking about responding to what is going on and not really reacting.
Right.
There is a difference between responding and reacting. Reacting is emotional, it is impulsive, and it comes out without any planning. But responding is strategic. Responding has in mind a goal. What do I want to accomplish? Right. And it's intentional and planned. So what we need to do as parents is to respond and not react. Very, very important. And regarding the drug abuse situation, we always have to keep the professional help angle in view, because drugs are on record as having modified, as modifying the brain in significant ways. So there are times when parental intervention alone will not be enough. At a certain level of drug use, and it happens very, very early in drug use. It's not just because drugs are chemicals and they strike a chord with certain parts of the brain. And once that identification is made, that connection is made, no amount of behavioral, reorientation would work. We need some professional help there. Okay, so moving on from there. Anger is a natural emotion. It's a healthy emotion, right? Anger would otherwise be healthy unless it is directed or expressed, improperly. So I think the first approach should be non-critical and non-judgmental. Now, I see that you are angry. I've noticed it. I acknowledge it. I'm not denying it. I'm not, ignoring you. I have noticed that you are angry, and you get angry pretty often. And I just want you to know that anger is not necessarily unhealthy, but we need to talk about it. Okay, I am interested. I want to understand your thought process, what frustrates you, and all of that. So showing the interest to reconnect. And we can use those moments for positive results, actually. And then after we've connected, we need to have a discussion about healthy and unhealthy ways of expressing anger. And it's always a good idea if these conversations are made, in a family setting rather than singling out an individual. So you can actually cover this in a family setting, in a devotional time or something like that, so that the individual doesn't feel embarrassed that you are singling me out. I mean, it's just, every time it's just about me, that it can be done in a family setting. And then I would say that there are, we need to educate on even the legal implications, because very often, I work at a place called a Crisis Response Center. And very often we have adolescents and adults both being brought to us because someone got angry, threw something, and either hurt another person or broke an item in the home.
Wow.
If you put a hole in the wall, or even if you break a glass, and the police come in and realize something was broken, that is domestic violence right there.
Really?
That is a domestic violence charge.
Oh, you didn't know that.
So long as something is thrown and there is a damage, it's a domestic violence charge. And so they are first taken to jail, booked into jail, and then granted bail, and then they bring them to the Crisis Response Center. Wow. And if you have a domestic violence charge on your record, there are many things you cannot do.
Wow.
There are many legal rights that are taken away from you. And so we need to educate on the implications of all that, but pledging our support, our love, and our ability to work through with them, and then I would say, before Apostle comes in, there are a lot of things we can do to prevent things from going that far, engaging children in extracurricular activities, especially physical exercise or sports. Those things keep them very, very engaged, very active and productive, so they don't have so much energy or excess emotions, right, to express in unhealthy ways. So that's one, and your extracurricular activities can help a lot. And if it continues, I mean, of course, there might be the need for professional help, but I'll leave the rest for Apostle to round up.
Wow. Apostle, so your thoughts, anger management in our children. Is it normal to see a lot of anger in their kids, maybe teenage years? Is that normal? So maybe that level sets for us and we are not like overwhelmed to see that? Or is it like, how do we pick on which is like the normal thing and which one is way off? And I think Dr. Joy just said, if you're breaking something, you're venting, putting a hole in the wall, that is just the extreme of it. So I think your thoughts would be helpful on that too.
All right, thank you. I realize that different children behave differently, react differently to issues. And in some of the extreme cases, like you said, professional help will be needed. But my mind is going back into this issue concerning my own children. And I observe that sometimes anger in children develops when they don't perceive channels of grievance resolution.
Of course, you have to explain that one. This one is like the books behind Dr. Joy. You've taken us on a high level.
There's a doctor on the screen, probably can help us with it. what I mean is that I observe that sometimes anger in our children builds up when they don't perceive that their grievances, what is worrying them, can be addressed in the home by the parents. If, for instance, the parent has, let me use the word, one way of addressing issues, always reactive, always accusing or accusatory, always lambasting, always finding fault, always making them feel guilty, always making them think they are wrong, always making them feel they are ignorant, they are children.
They are children.
They don't have brains, they are not mature yet. Eventually, when they have issues, they know if they should bring them to you or bring those issues to you, that means your responses are likely to fall in any of these categories.
Right.
And so they determine, okay, I'm not going to go to my parents anymore because, as usual. But what is not voiced cannot be addressed. So once they keep it in, over time, it builds up. And when emotions build up, volcano, whoop. And if parents don't find a way to give outlets for children to speak out, but raise them in an environment of bottled up emotions, it becomes part of them. They grow with it. And then another side is that they begin to have the same perception of, about authority figures in their life or around them. So when they go to school, the authority figure is the teacher or the teachers. They have the same perception that these adults, that's the way they behave.
It's adults.
When they go to church, these pastors or these leaders, spiritual leaders, so can be educational leaders, political leaders, social leaders, family leaders, leadership in general, they develop a certain kind of opinion about them, which sometimes is not healthy. Because they know that, oh, this issue we are talking about, should we go and tell the pastor or my parents or the teacher or this? The same reaction is going to come up. And so it becomes a nature. And when that nature sits in them, it becomes reactive and corrosive. So one way is to make sure. So I discovered that, for instance, my wife is the very strict type, the old school strict type. I'm a bit more liberal, not liberal in terms of allowing bad things, but I'm open-minded. So when a child comes with an issue or I observe an issue, I don't just, like, maybe a child will be angry. I don't take it upon them. I quietly, and I'm trying to reason out what is making him do that. Then I'll give him the chance to talk. Even if they are stupid, foolish, and sometimes they are foolish and stupid. Their argument and their reasons foolish and stupid. But they know that I give them the hearing, non-judgmental, to speak out. And then help them out, give them good counsel, advice. I don't quote scripture. I say, according to John chapter 3, verse 10. That's always a backfiring kind of way. According to, this is what Moses did. And when Joseph was in the this, and that's why if you do that, no, it won't work. I was going to make a point, but because of time, I stopped. You use teaching moments. So I use teaching moments a lot, the principle of teaching moments. So for instance, he may raise his voice, maybe towards his mother. And the mother will expect me to on the spot. Now, I'll tell the child, you don't talk that with your mother. Stop it. That's it. The mother may think you are too soft, you must give it, let them. I know I should give it to them, but not the way you want me to. So later I'll go to the child, I call him, or when you're sitting in the car, I use teaching moments. I said, do you know that the way you talk to your mother wasn't good at all? I understand you are angry, but you don't do that. It's your mother. And if you have grievances, you must have a nicer way, more respectful, mature way to handle it. We are not saying bury your grievances. It's not right. If you bury it, it will destroy you. But you must find a better way. And I use examples and give examples and that sort of thing, and use that as teaching moments.
Right.
So I always look for occasions to use as teaching moments to teach them values, to teach them principles. That's me. I always, they may think maybe I let it go. I didn't deal with it. No, I saw it. I'm looking for the right opportunity. An opportunity will always come. Maybe one day they'll go and get angry at their teacher or maybe somebody, and then it will backfire. And then they come home and they say, so you see, if you don't learn how the principle of talking nicely or reacting nicely, sort of thing, it will. So you remember the other time how you dealt with your mother? It was wrong. Remember I told. So I use teaching moments a lot. I use teaching moments, the principle of teaching moments a lot.
Right.
A lot. Let me give an example of teaching moments. Let's assume you are watching movie with your husband, and and on the movie, let's say Nigerian movie, and in the Nigerian movie, the wife on the movie tells the husband, as for you and your, let's say, as for you and your blockhead on the movie.
Yeah.
And then your son is watching the movie with you. And on the movie, the man just laughs, smiles, pat the wife and say, oh, as for you and whatever. And then they laugh over it and then they move on. But then you heard your son sitting by you say, how can this man allow a woman to talk to him like that? Oh, you must pay attention to your son's perspective about women.
Yeah.
You must know that your son has developed or developing a certain warped perspective about women. So in other words, when he grows up, he will not allow a woman, not that another human being, but a woman.
A woman.
So parents, don't say it's a movie, so laugh over it and say, oh, that's for you, crazy, oh, crazy, that's for you. No. Pay attention. And not address it at that time. One day, as a mother or as a father, you find an occasion, something to use as a teaching moment and refer that you remember that movie. I heard what you said, but I realized that your perspective about women is not quite good. And then you use that to help to form a new perspective of responses to women in your child's mind. One, he begins to know that you pay attention. You pay attention. Two, you don't talk. And the fact that you don't talk doesn't mean that you don't pay attention. And three, he'll get to know that my dad is white. He helps me with values. I respect him for that. Right. And you grow with that.
Absolutely. Beautiful. So paying attention. Go ahead, Dr. John.
Happy. Two things that I forgot to say, which Apostle just said. Actually, Apostle could have covered this whole thing, crowd. I'm learning a lot. Okay, so I think that the issue about episodes of anger, anger plays out in the form of episodes. And when in the heat of the moment, when emotions are high, it's not always the best time to address the issues. Because teaching will not go down well when somebody is furious. So we use space and time to help things subside a bit before we address them. And like Apostle is saying, you might want to, just create space or create time and then go to the room, sit on the bed and have a conversation. Or the next time the two of you are alone in the car, you can have a conversation about it. So that's very, very important. I think that's also one of the differences between reacting and responding. Absolutely. Responding is strategic and intentional. Then the other thing that I have started to do with my kids is that to develop values, family values. And we are actually writing them down, and we want to make sure that they are generally accepted, things that we have accepted as ways in which we behave in this house.
That's it.
So in this house, these are the ways we express our anger. These other ways are unacceptable.
Right.
And once those are accepted, then you can make reference to them easily later on without them thinking you are just picking it out of the box. No, it's something we have agreed on a long time ago. You remember?
Right,
You know,
right,
yeah,
right.
so,
That is really good. I mean, I think Auntie Abba also said something when we talked about this as well, having that family values and, you know, making it a shared experience so people know what is expected of them. That is really powerful. I'm going to move on to another category, for faith. So for us as Christians, as our kids are growing, we are assuming that they will stay on course, they will not deviate. Actually, I think we have a higher expectation of that than the fact that they will question things or they'll come to us. So these are questions that I'm going to lump together for the sake of time and see how much we can do. It says, what do you do when your teen starts questioning their faith? When they are questioning their faith, that's okay, why do you go to church? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? How do you manage that? Then I'll add on to that. It's like, where is God when people are heading in this, you know, coronavirus? Why is God not doing anything? So kids are now questioning more. I mean, in terms of their faith and the things that we easily believe because we didn't have the ability to maybe question, but they are questioning more and around the faith areas. So I'm going to just lump this together and ask you that question as to how do we manage faith in kids that are growing, that are hearing different things. Some of the kids are hearing, oh, God doesn't exist. I mean, there's nothing about sin that you should worry about. They're hearing different things, like Apostle said, the environment, the things that we don't even know about, they are shaping them, they are talking to them, they are questioning things. How do we manage faith, you know, for kids as they're growing?
Yeah, I know Apostle will come up with a more detailed response, but these are all theological questions that we encounter all the time. And I want to say that the first response, just like in the earlier instances, is not to respond as if, number one, we should not respond as if we are shocked and that we are helpless. Even if we don't have a clue, don't let them see that. Because so as soon as they begin to see or sense frustration on your part, it won't play well. I mean, they would begin to downplay your inputs. So it's always a good thing to have that receptive stance.
Yeah. Anytime
they come to us with questions that we have no idea about, or questions that are confusing or even more advanced than us. And I want to advise, even before I go on to address this, I want to advise that we keep, if you're a Christian parent, it's always a good idea to keep a running list of what the Bible says about various things.
Yes.
It's very, very important. And I can say it comes in so handy.
Yeah.
When you have it can just be a simple word file that you keep on a computer, on your cell phone, and just research various things, the possible things that have been coming up, and find out the biblical stance on them and how to explain them to various ages. I think it will help a lot. And maybe there might be books out there about how to explain these very theologically confusing things to various groups of children. And the first thing is, oh, that's a great question. It means that your mind is working at, I mean, you are being curious. It's part of your curiosity. And I appreciate that. Can we schedule a time to discuss it? And between the times that you're going to be doing your homework. One of the things that I also notice is that parenting is like enrolling in school.
Easy, yes.
We have to go to school and learn about things that we did not plan to learn about in the first place. We have to. We have to. Apostle was talking about how teachers influence our children.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to go learn about what our teachers, investigate them, ask questions about their backgrounds, their beliefs, the teachers of our parents, our children, because they may have some views, strongly held views that they are imparting to our children. Anyway, I digress a little bit. So then we have to do some homework and then come up and discuss these things. I'm not going to provide a particular answer to the question as to say, where is God when people are hurting, that question. There's a theological answer. I believe the apostle will come up with it, but the approach is far more important than even the knowledge. The approach is far more important than knowledge. And you may even sometimes you may end up giving it to them as homework.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go research this in the Bible and let's talk about it.
Beautiful.
Anyway, Apostle, over to you.
I'm taking the tip from there. Research and let's talk. Yeah. Apostle, I mean, this is an amazing question and very bishopric, question as such. We are parents, we are learning. And sometimes we also have these questions. I think we've all asked the questions in our journey as Christians, one way or the other. Maybe not voiced it out, but here we are faced with children who openly come out and ask you, so why do you even speak in tongues? Why do you do this? Why do you go to church every day? What is all this? How do we manage these questions as the kids are growing up, and as we also want them to understand the things, like you said, not just brush the wire aside, but really educate them so it's a permanent thing that they've learned and they are growing up with. Yeah.
Okay. Faith.
Apostle, you make me laugh.
Why?
The way you breathe very
deep. Has to come deep.
Thank you. Well, faith that is not questioned is faith not rooted.
Apostle, you have to say it again. I have to write it and quote you on it.
I'm writing it, Cry.
Yeah.
Faith that is not questioned is faith that is shallow, not rooted. Even Jesus' own disciples questioned him. We have followed you all this while. What are we going to get?
Wow.
Now, I remember listening to an interview by the late Larry King, CNN Live, that he had with the late Billy Graham. And Larry King asked him whether he had doubted God before and the Bible and heaven. And Bill Graham said, oh, several times. Several times. So even we ourselves, sometimes we come to a place and say, God, where are you? So our children going through that process should not be seen as crazy or abnormal.
Wow.
Now, when you sit in your car driving, even you have the best road in your state, and the road is the most straight line, the smoothest straight line, you still have to keep your eye on the steer, your hand on the steering wheel. So that should it go off, you are there for a purpose, to give direction to the car. So even in the smoothest of roads, the straightest of roads, the car still can veer off a little bit. So you are there to guide. So when your son's faith is being challenged, don't see it as abnormal, because remember, social media is also teaching your children.
Right.
They are hearing from their teachers. They are hearing from their friends, their peers. They are hearing from the society. And faith comes by hearing.
Right.
whether it's positive faith or negative faith, they all come through hearing. So they'll come to challenge their faith, more so when the devil doesn't want your children to follow Christ.
Yeah.
He'll find a way to use any of this media to bring information that to confuse your child to question. But questioning must be seen positively as part of growth and development.
As part of growth.
And that's why you are there as a parent to guide them. But the question is, these days, some of us who are a bit of the old school are a bit better. But these days, many of the people in our churches don't know that much about Christ. Don't know that much about Bible perspective on issues. So when our children come and question us, we ourselves, we don't know. And the answers we don't provide, somebody will provide.
Yes.
So your children will go through the process of questioning their faith. They will go through it. Not that they may. They will go through the process of questioning their faith.
Okay.
If they come to ask you, you are one of the best parents. You are one of the best parents. You are very friendly and social with your children and open.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that development of relationship with your children, they will not come and ask you. Because they think, like I said, you might even punish them or question them or make them feel guilty. Okay. So they'll go through that process. Now, one thing parents, I will encourage parents not to do is, don't let us try and take the youthful stage of our children from them. Don't let us try and deny them of their youthful experience.
Okay.
When children are youth or our children are youth, certain attitudes and behaviors will come through them. Now, if you hit them and beat them with the Bible all the time, they will keep quiet, but eventually they will either look for answers from external sources or form their own answers, and then they're just waiting to get out of the house. So when we were young, ask yourself, when you were a teenager, how were you behaving? How were you thinking? What were some of your attitude and responses? You were not all right or not all wrong, but certain kind of attitude come to our children when they are in a certain season of their lives. So if you deny them of their youthful stage thinking, lifestyle, attitudes, and all that, they will hide it. When they leave your house, then they will start living it like they were teenagers. It's like they have to make up for lost time.
Yes.
So have a heart large enough to accommodate their youthful exuberance, youthful foolishness, youthful stupidity, youthful whatever. Have a heart big enough, but have confidence that you are in charge of the steering wheel.
That's right.
I mean, you are tolerating it. You have a heart for it, but you know it's not right. But you know eventually you're going to let them end out the right way. You know what teaching moments you are going to use to help them to understand and to. So if we were denied our youthful, when we were in secondary school, and there was what we call the scripture union days. Many so-called students, when they grew up, they rebelled. Not all of them, but many of them rebelled. But the good news is that God said, train the children the way they should go, and when they grow, they will never depart from it.
Amen.
So as parents, I will say this 1,000,000 times. Our primary responsibility towards our children is not giving them education. It's not giving them food or clothing or shelter. It's not making them feel good or get whatever. The primary role is to teach them values.
Values. Oh my. Say it again.
Wow.
And I'll say this 1,000,000,000 times.
Values.
Values is the reason God gave them to you is because of values, not because of a car, not because of PhD degree, not because of Harvard. My children went to Harvard, they went to MIT, they went to Oxford. God didn't bring them to you because of Oxford. There are many people fulfilling God's purpose without Oxford, or without MIT, or without Ivy League education, or without even university education. So God didn't bring them to you because of a car or a house or whatever. Those are must be seen as means to an end. But the end is values. And let me read this from the book of Deuteronomy about the principle of parenting, principle of generational parenting that God established for his people. Deuteronomy chapter 6. He says, and these words of Deuteronomy chapter 6, I read verse 6 to verse 6 and verse 10. I will jump. Says, and these words which I command you today shall be in your heart, speaking to parents.
Okay.
Shall be in your heart.
In your heart.
You shall teach them diligently to your children. And you shall talk about them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way. When you lie down and when you rise up. Now, walking by the way, those days they were agrarian people, they were farmers. They walk to the farm and come back. But this time we drive to New York together. We drive in the car to take them to school, or we drive together in the church. So even whilst we are in the car, while we are taking a walk, whilst we are cooking in the kitchen, let's use every opportunity to teach them. God said, these values that I'm teaching you. God never mentioned car, Harvard, Ivy League education. Said values. Then he goes on to say that you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gate. These values. We think that what we must display at the gate is our beautiful Mercedes and BMW car that we bought for our children's birthday with ribbons. None of that. Said, you shall write them on your doorpost of your house and on your gate. What? Values. Then he continued by saying, so shall it be when the Lord your God brings you into the land of which he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you large and beautiful cities, which you did not build, houses full of goods which you did not fail. Okay, I think that goes on. Okay, so what God is saying is that whether you're in a house or outside the house, when you wake up or sleep, when you go out or town, find every occasion to bring values to your children. And the best values is the one that the children see in us. That's the best. That's not the values they read in the Bible, but the value they see in us.
Apostle, our time is up, but I need to ask you these questions before we wrap up. And I know, Dr. Joy, you have to be somewhere too. So I'm going to really push in these two questions. I'm going to have us look at it. So as we are talking about values, right? And you're just saying it, and I think it's one of those things that, I mean, this is really hitting home for us in this environment with everything being questioned, even some of the things that we believe strongly on that, thing that is like, okay, now what do we do with them? So one question here that is going to be maybe take a longer time, but hopefully we can wrap it up, is that a 12-year-old thinks that he may be trans, right? So there are different categories of this LGBTQ happening today. And how do you address that? Because at the middle school level, the kids are exposed to it. Even as early as 8, 7, and all that, the kids are not exposed to it. Values. I think that ties into that, values. And then another question that we'll use to end up is that the girls, how do we train our girls in this era? Is modesty still appropriate? It's how do we even instill that? And I think it all comes back to the values. So Dr. Joy, you're going to start, and Apostle's going to, or maybe Apostle, you go first because you're already talking, and then we can just wrap it up that way. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned the 12-year-old girl and the alternative sexual lifestyle thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the second one is what?
Is how you raise up girls in this environment with all that is going on. There was another question on prom night, which I don't think we'll get to, but how do we raise up our girls, instilling again the modesty that we learned growing up into our children in this environment that they are seeing a lot of things on social media. And in fact, modesty now seems to be really, really archaic if you're looking at it in today's world. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, young people, young girls, of course, young people of late, they feel that when you talk about no sex before marriage, what, why, what? Like in their generation, it's like, why? What's wrong with that? Yeah, we are in trouble, I must admit. We are all in trouble. Bible says that in the last days, this kind of behavior will abound. So we must admit, without kidding ourselves, that we are in trouble. Especially when legal systems are being changed to tolerate sin, what we call sin. When even in some societies, what we call biblical sin has been seen as hate language or hate speech. We are in trouble. But Bible says that the foundation of the Lord still stands sure. So we can always find solace in God's foundation. So I recommend three things. Values.
Values. I love it.
Teach them values. Number two, live those values.
Wow.
That's right.
Live out the endeavor. Instead of being hard on your children, be hard on yourself to live out those values.
Oh, Apostle, I think this one, we could have a whole session on it. Be hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
To live out those values, to just make sure that the next generation gets it. I think that is a powerful one.
Because when you teach your children the values and then you live out those values, what you are doing is what I call life lamination. You are laminating your children. For instance, God created plants, you know plants.
Yeah.
And you have leaves. Let's say those of us who know, let's say cocoyam leaf or any leaf, any tree with broad leaf.
Yeah.
Have you seen any leaf that is wet before? Well, you see droplets of rain on them.
Yeah.
But they don't get wet. It just sits on the outside. When the wind blows and they shake, all the water droplets is gone. So teaching your children, because God built into the leaves lamination, natural lamination in such a way that the water cannot soak deep into the only time it can soak deep is when the leaves fall off and they get rotten. Then the water can seep into it. Until then, it cannot. So when you teach our children values and we display, we manifest those values to them, we may not be aware, but we are laminating them.
Wow.
When they go out to society and all these social media and legal laws and school and teach alternative lifestyle and all that, they are laminated.
Yeah.
They will hear the same thing, feel the same thing, but there's something built in them that will eventually make them shake it off.
Wow. I love it. I love it. Apostle, I think this is amazing.
Eventually, that's why God said, teach the children the way they should go, and when they grow, they will not depart. It may appear as if it's having an effect on them, they may probably even want to try it. But one, teach them values. Two, live out those values. And my third recommendation is pray.
Yeah.
Pray for your children. Don't always call them to pray with you. Pray for them.
Yeah.
As for prayer, don't let it get out of it, because that is the spiritual antidote to spiritual attacks. And all these things going on are all spiritual.
Yeah.
So pray for your children. Pray for them all the time. Pray for them. And I realize that parenting doesn't start. It doesn't finish until our children are dead or we are dead. Because even after they have become, there's a lot to talk about. Let me stop it here. I'll go beyond the time. That's fine. Next time.
So Dr. Joy, your thoughts as we wrap up on our question and answer. We didn't get to talk about the dating stuff and all that, but I'm sure we'll save it for another time. But how do we move on from here?
Yeah, so you can see that we're talking mostly to principles, general principles rather than specific situations, because the principles apply in all situations or almost all situations. And for instance, in the case of alternative sexual preferences and, being trans or LGBTQ, whatever, the key thing the apostle said, and I'll be overlapping a little bit. The reason we need to live out those values ourselves, the Christian biblical values ourselves, is that there's something spiritual about parenting, pastoring, leading. There's something spiritual there. People tend to do what we do, not what we say.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
People are more likely, you can be saying one thing and they'll be doing the other because you are doing the other.
Absolutely.
And so it's spiritual. I mean, it just happens naturally. So that's important. The thing about prayer is, one thing I learned is that the prayer is the only way to control people without their permission. That's the only, it's like a remote control.
I like that. I'm writing it down. That's powerful.
Prayer is the only way to affect someone's life without their permission. So let's take a cue out of that as well. But I think that coming back to family values, when these things are discussed openly, and always we need to make room to discuss these things. Don't let them feel like you just ignore them or write them off. No, that would not turn out right. But what do you know about being trans? I'm curious, I'm interested. What are your perspectives? Where did you learn about this? Because if we don't know where they learned about it, then we are not even addressing the root cause. We need to know where they learned about it. Do you know anyone who is trans? I'm curious, I'm interested. During all that time, you are collecting data and preparing yourself to deal with it. And then we need to teach, really. I mean, the scripture says in Genesis 1:27 that what God created man in his own image, male and female, he created. So our maleness or femaleness, if there's anything like that, our gender was created in us. Gender is not chosen. It is created and offered to us as a gift.
Wow.
And these things have to be taught and discussed, not necessarily in response to that answer, but it may be a devotional subject one morning that would help to answer that problem. And then the family values, it's in this house, we live by these principles and we all abide by them. When you go out and you establish your home, then you can develop your own values as well. But honestly, they would most likely continue with your values if it is done properly. So, and let me just say finally that one of the things that make us freak out as parents is that we think we are losing the battle. Sometimes we freak out because we think they are going wayward. We think that they are losing their faith. Oh, what is going to happen if this happens? We extrapolate and then we see we magnify the problem bigger than it should be. It may just be a simple, innocent curiosity. And so we need to balance our love with confidence, knowing that once we are on the Lord's side, we are in the majority.
In the majority.
Can I add one or two points quickly?
Go ahead. You have a minute. Sometimes
we parents, we try to control our children, direct them, control them, not because of them, but because of our dignity.
What do people say?
What people say about, I'm a deacon, I'm a pastor, I'm a leader. If you go and do this, it's going to affect me.
Hey, this one.
And so you are stopping your child from doing that, preventing or control or lambasting them, not because you really want to help them. You want to help them, of course, but the primary reason because of your dignity,
status.
your respect, your status, your what that is wrong. And your children always read through that. Then the next point, the last point I'll make is the greatest harm any parent can cause their children is the greatest harm and the greatest confusion they can create in their minds is when they teach them one values, but they live differently. Children have battles in their minds. They're trying to process it. Why is it so? It's like if you hear that your pastor is sleeping with another woman when he's married. How can a pastor do that? But pastor, they say he did it yesterday, but yesterday's service was anointed and miracles. So how can pastor do this yesterday? The woman said it was yesterday afternoon, and pastor preached in the evening, and there were miracles. So won't you have confusion in your mind spiritually? And
there is confusion.
Yes.
Right
Now
there.
this is an extreme illustration I'm giving, but in a way, it plays out in the home when we teach our children the Bible and this and that, but we live something differently. That confusion goes to their children, and that's the greatest harm you can cause your children.
Wow, amazing. I told you these two gentlemen. It is a blast that we are having here already, and I know our time is fast spent, but there's just so much that you can glean, and hopefully we can get some of these into podcasts or something that we can just listen, because sometimes you may not be facing it today, but it's just a few years or something, you also have your challenges come up, and just know that you are not alone. We are all going through it. The children will go through it. We went through it as children as well. And by God's grace, we made it. So they also will make it. And like Pastor Joy said, we are on God's side. And Apostle said it, that the foundation of the Lord still stands sure in these, shaking and difficult moments and times that we are in. So let's teach them the values. Let's really hone in on the values. Let's take it, because all the questions, some of them that I couldn't get to, you see that if we go through all of them, we'll come back to the values. What are we teaching? How are we living out the values? Because when we do that, then when we pray, and that is also one thing that we cannot do without, and pray and just keep on doing the things that we have to do. God is faithful. He will take care of our children. He will bring them through, and the next generation will be preserved as well.
I'm looking at a masterpiece. Oh, you know how to fight. You're stronger